Today on Let's Talk Crime, we're going to learn a little bit about DUIs. So Frank, let us know about DUIs. I guess, what are some of the consequences if we get charged with a DUI? What happens when we get pulled over? And the whole thing.
Sure. Good evening again. Welcome to Let's Talk Crimes. As always, I hope you guys are having a good night, and I hope that you enjoy the program, because this is what it's about. It's about enjoying the program. It's conversational, and I want this to be the place that you come to just talk crimes and get questions answered. DUI, it's driving under the influence. Most people call it the driving under the influence of alcohol. The truth is, it doesn't have to be alcohol. It's driving under the influence of alcohol or any unlawful chemical. That's the definition of DUI in the state of Florida, and it's pretty much in all the states. The DUI, it falls under the group of misdemeanors. It's a traffic infraction, but it's a group of misdemeanor because it's punishable to up to 1 year. If you saw my other episodes, I made the distinction. I personally, as an attorney and one of those that don't like DUIs, I don't like to, it's just not the type of crime that I like to represent. I think it's difficult to represent, but there's a lot of DUIs in all the metropolitan cities.
Cool. Hey, so if I get a DUI and they pull me over, am I going to the jail even if it's my first one? Do they have like a thing where if it's your first DUI, they let you off easy, or how does that work?
Let me run you by the typical DUI stop. You get stopped, the officer sees you swerving back and forth, doing things unusual. He stops you. He feels that you're DUI. Normally in these big cities, they have access to a breathalyzer. They don't breathalyze you right away. They do some field sobriety tests. Everyone has probably seen it, where you have to touch your nose and walk in a line, and several things that they're looking for. If they decide that you are impaired, where your normal faculties are impaired, that's the language, then you will go to jail that day. It's a bondable offense. However, let me tell you something about DUI in the state of Florida and almost in every state. Unlike even more serious bondable offenses, you cannot get out of jail right away. We have an 8-hour period. If you get arrested, whatever time you get clocked in, even if the bondsman is on the other side of the jail, you cannot get out until 8 hours. They came up with that years ago, so you cannot come out under the influence when you do come out. Hoping that 8 hours is enough to let it go. But yes, the answer is you could go to jail not only that day, you can go to jail if you're convicted. You can go to jail for DUI. People misunderstand. They say they know a lot of people that don't go to jail. And I can tell you that there are a lot of people that don't go to jail because they end up pleading guilty. But if you're found guilty by a jury, you may go to jail.
Cool. And I know sometimes people lose their license when they get a DUI. Does that happen every time, or is it after you've done it a few times, or depending how bad your DUI was? Or
when you get arrested for a DUI, if you end up pleading guilty to the DUI, your license is always going to get suspended a minimum of 6 months if you pled guilty to DUI. This is what makes DUI so different than other crimes. Two things are happening at the same time. There's a law that says that DUI, driving under the influence, is against the law. That's the crime that you were arrested for. However, the judge, the criminal judge, is not the one that decides who drives or who does not drive in the state of Florida. And I use the state of Florida because that's my state. So what happens is an interesting dynamic. You have the judge to worry about, but you have the Department of Motor Vehicle, which you sign an agreement with them that says that anytime that an officer requests to take your breathalyzer, you are going to give it to him. If you refused, you could beat the DUI. Listen to this. People have a problem understanding this. You can say in court, I'm not guilty. I'm going to get a lawyer, the best lawyer in town. I'm going to say I wasn't impaired beyond my normal faculty. The jury finds you not guilty. You win, right? Well, kind of. You don't completely win, because independently of the crime, you broke your agreement with the Department of Motor Vehicle, whom you told you were going to give a breathalyzer to. So even though it feels like a victory, you're probably going to get your license suspended anyway. And you're going to have to do whatever the Department of Motor Vehicle says you have to do, even if you were found not guilty.
That is crazy. And if they found you not guilty, is there usually, is it like 100% chance that the DMV is still gonna make you suffer consequences because you didn't take the breathalyzer, or do they take it easy sometimes?
Almost always. The rules for them don't change. They're gonna have a set of rules. If you took the breathalyzer and it went before 0.8, then they're gonna say you took it and you went high, and then you're gonna say, but I won in the jury trial, and you would have to argue that was DMV. But I can almost tell you that regardless of what happened in court, you're gonna have to deal with DMV. And they're going to give you a list of things you got to do because you were arrested independently of guilty or not. Right. And you're usually, look, DUI, I started the program by saying I don't like them. They're very difficult. They cause a lot of distress. People don't understand. They feel that it's not a serious crime because it doesn't feel like a felony. And it really causes them a lot of personal hardship. They sometimes lose their work because of DUIs. And it's just tough. Don't get a DUI, guys.
And it's crazy because, the 0.08 could just be 2 beers. 1 or 2 beers.
0.08 is different for everybody, but I can tell you it's not a lot. I've been told, and this is just a general rule, that it's about 1 legal drink, which I think is 1 ounce of alcohol,
right,
per 160 pounds for an hour. That's not a lot. That's a drink. That means that if you have 3, you're going to be drunk for 3 or 4 hours. So 0.08, and let me tell you quickly before I run out of time. The breathalyzer, it's a machine. It makes mistakes. Sometimes lawyers argue against the breathalyzer. They tell the officer, how do I know it's calibrated? Officers have to then go to their department and bring in proof that the breathalyzer was calibrated. It has to be calibrated like a speedometer. And sometimes even with that, if you really want to litigate a DUI, you can get your own expert and argue against the breathalyzer where they can examine it. These things happen, but honestly, other attorneys in my field don't like when I say this. But the truth is that most individuals that are arrested for DUI end up having to plead guilty to it. And it's a whole year of an ordeal.
That's interesting. I didn't know that you could argue against the breathalyzer. I think on TV it's almost like one of those things that the breathalyzer never lies. But look,
the breathalyzer
it could be a legitimate option.
It's a scientific machine and it makes mistakes. It's calibrated wrong sometimes. There are departments that make their officers give it more than once because there's a margin of error. So it's pretty accurate, but it's not perfect.
Okay. And one last question. So I get caught with the DUI and I crash the car and it actually led to someone dying. What happens there? How does this change the scenario?
The DUI now completely changed the scenario. It becomes the moment there's a death. If the officer had already arrested you on a DUI, sometimes it happens at the scene. Many times it happens exactly like you explained it, because many times the death doesn't happen immediately. So the person gets arrested with DUI, with great bodily injury and stuff, and then a month later the other person is deceased, and the state attorney's office will file new charges, and the charge will go to DUI manslaughter. If you have been released in bond, chances are that you will be called to a courtroom. The state will file the new charges, and you will be taken into custody. And it's a very serious charge. As an attorney, I have tried it. It's a very difficult charge to win. People confuse DUI manslaughter with vehicular homicide. Those are 2 different charges. A DUI manslaughter, you do not have to show, the state doesn't have to show that you were at fault. You don't have to be at fault of the accident. All they have to show is that you were in possession of the car, that you were under the influence of a chemical or alcohol, and that the operation of the car caused the death, and you will be found guilty. It doesn't matter that the other person took the red light. It doesn't matter. Right. It's somewhat relevant, but it's not an accident where you have to show that you're not at fault. It's different.
All right. And the manslaughter charge, I guess it really complicates things. And I think even that would be a great a great topic for maybe another episode.
It will definitely be. Unfortunately, people go to prison, and DUI manslaughter is almost always, if you're found guilty, will end up in prison. It's one of those crimes that the exposure, I call it life impacting. Your life will be impacted. Not even talking about the other lives. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it and have a great day. Always remember, if you have any specific question that you want to address, please feel free to email us.
What you gonna do when they come for you, bad